President Donald Trump is set to announce his decision on the implementation of an array of new tariffs Wednesday, as some of the tariffs he has already announced will take effect. Trump has dubbed Wednesday Liberation Day and is planning an event in the White House Rose Garden to unveil his decision on broader tariffs. So he had announced tariffs on Mexico and Canada earlier in his administration, but agreed to postpone both following negotiations with leaders of those countries that led to agreements to bolster border security. So each tariff adds about 25% on goods from those respective countries. And while those tariffs were part of border security negotiations, Trump is expected to unveil broader tariffs to achieve his stated goal of rebalancing American global trade. So let's welcome in Representative Marlin Stutzman from the great state of Indiana. So Representative, what do you think we can expect from this announcement?
Well, good morning, Jenna. Great to be with you this morning. This is probably new territory for a lot of Americans. This is a different sort of tax policy that many of us aren't used to. We always hear of tariffs here and there, but President Trump is really doing a reset for American taxpayers and for the American economy. And I think it's important. I mean, it's kind of I've been going through a little bit of a history lesson on a variety of things, but I'll just give you a couple of examples. I'm from Indiana, so we've got agriculture and we've got manufacturing, a lot of car manufacturing. And you look at America, we don't build our domestic companies, Chevy, GM, Ford, Chrysler, we don't build cars like we used to. The Japanese and Koreans really build the majority of the cars that we drive in the United States. And so Trump is trying to bring that sort of manufacturing back. Also the steel industry, and China has been just eating our lunch. They've got different set of rules there. They don't have the environmental rules that we do here in the United States. They don't have the labor rules. They just play at a very different level, and they can produce things very cheaply. And so that's why President Trump is saying, look, we want those jobs here in the United States, and so we're going to level the playing field by putting taxes on those goods that are coming back to the United States and try to build more of those manufacturing jobs here in the United States rather than letting them go overseas.
And, I think that's a great explanation because, Representative Stutzman, I've heard arguments kind of from both sides and even among conservatives not really sure that reciprocal tariffs are the way to go, and are tariffs going to ultimately hurt the taxpayer rather than actually have the effect on the other countries. But then we're seeing how, some of these world leaders who the tariffs are being imposed are saying, okay, well, let's wait, please, because we don't want to actually have that imposed on us. And so then there's some negotiation room. So overall, do you think this is a good tactic for Trump to kind of rebalance the economy and help the American taxpayer, or is this more of a playing the long game?
Well, it's playing the long game for sure. But, for example, China, they put a 25% tariff on American-made cars that go into China. And our tax on China for cars that come from China to the United States is only 2.5%. And so that's just such an imbalance. That's what I think we need to recognize. And I like you mentioned reciprocal tariffs. That's what I think the hope is that we would equal the tariff and then say, look, if we want free trade, then how about let's lower the tariffs? And I would hope every country would say, you know what, maybe not a bad idea, especially since the American economy is the largest in the world and the most productive in the world. Everybody wants to be in the United States market. And so that's what Trump is saying is, why should we pay China or Japan or European Union countries pay their tariffs, but when we try to ship our products to them, they pay a very small tariff. And so that's the imbalance. And I think that if we as Americans, realize that we've been taken advantage of for a long time, that these tariffs really level the playing field. And you look at how much we have spent on defense around the globe for other countries, and none of them have ever paid a dime back to us. Very little, if any. And we're the largest contributor to NATO. I think that's what Trump has seen and is seeing and is explaining to us. And I get it. I agree that we have to make sure we look out for America first, because if we're not healthy, which we're not, $36 trillion of debt is about to create a heart attack. And so we need to do something different to start turning this ship around and making America healthy again.
And Representative Marlin Stutzman, you've also posted on your pinned post on X, is talking about Trump's tariffs level the playing field, put America first, and create a future worth investing in, and that the tariffs are still working with all of these cutouts. It's actually a really great visual. There are a lot of cutouts from a wide variety of publications talking about these companies that will shift production or open different facilities in the United States to avoid these types of tariffs. And so one of the collateral consequences, or maybe benefits to America, is what Trump has said for a long time, especially even his first term. He wants to bring manufacturing back to America because so much of it has been exported abroad, that he wants to incentivize these companies to manufacture here, not only for quality, but also for the job market. So is this part of the entire tariff conversation and perhaps his policy strategy?
Yeah, it's very true. I hear a lot of this already, especially coming from the manufacturing belt in Indiana. I've talked to folks from AM General. Their vendors are saying, hey, they're seeing a spike in orders because companies overseas are starting to come to the United States to do their business. That way they don't have to pay the tariff. Honda has announced they're going to be bringing manufacturing back on automobiles from Mexico, most likely, to build. We're seeing it in Hyundai has announced a big facility down in Louisiana. Johnson & Johnson, Eli Lilly. I mean, it's not just, auto manufacturing. It's a lot of other pieces. Here's one, Jenna, that I came across in our office in the beef industry. Back in the 2000s, Australia banned American beef because of the mad cow disease. I think a lot of us remember those days when mad cow disease was around, and that's been almost 20 years ago. Well, so Australia banned American beef from going into Australia. But we continued to buy Australian beef into the United States. Well, today, on one particular breed, Wagyu, the Australian Wagyu exports, it's about half of the U.S. market in the United States is Australian-raised beef, Wagyu beef, and that we can't ship it to Australia, but they can ship it to us, and they've banned us. I mean, the only way it can go into Australia is if it's cooked. And so I dropped a bill to put a 70% tariff on Australian beef coming into the United States. They have a currency advantage, and plus they ban American beef going into Australia. So that's a scenario that Trump is looking at, over and over in all these different scenarios and saying, how come they can do that to us, but we can't do that to them? And that's the question that, even the Australian broadcasting company is starting to ask us. Well, is this, why would you drop a tariff on us? It was like, well, because you banned the American farmer from shipping our product to Australia. So a good relationship goes both ways.
Yeah, and this seems so common sense, Representative, because, you're talking about something in this particular instance with Australia that's gone on for 20 years, and nobody in the American executive has recontemplated this and said, well, maybe, we don't need to accept that from Australia, and maybe this is something that is no longer in effect. And I haven't heard about mad cow disease for years, unless I'm watching Boston Legal, which was great, but they were making fun of it. But this is something where it's almost like we're just going along with the status quo, like Doge, saying, oh, it's just pro forma that we're spending all kinds of millions and millions of dollars on all of these line items, and nobody is going back and saying, well, wait a minute, why? So it seems like a lot of these questions are simply asking why and forcing these other countries to prove the rationale, or to have reciprocity and treat us with, frankly, the respect America deserves. Yeah,
no, that's exactly right. And I think there's a verse in Romans that talks about taxes, and Romans 13:7, it says, "Render therefore to all their due, taxes to whom taxes are due, customs to whom customs." That's tariffs. And so this is not. This is more about making sure that it's fair for both sides. I mean, a good relationship, it's give and take, and we should never take advantage of other people. Even in our Christian walk, it's about treating others the way that we would want to be treated. And one of the things that I think is just we as Americans finally are tired of being taken advantage of. We are a very generous people. We love to help people. I mean, we send more money as a country into mission work around the world than any other country in the world. But when we start to have to borrow to pay for bills, when you have to, the economy starts to slow down, you have to make sure that we are fiscally healthy. And that's one of the things that I focus a lot on because it's a family value. If families don't have a strong, if there's not a good job in the family, if there's not the ability to pay bills and put food on the table and send children to school with the supplies they need, then that hurts the family. But that's really what I believe President Trump is doing here, is he is looking out for America first and saying, let's get our country back on track because we do want to help others. And I think that's a biblical thing to do.
Yeah, and I love that you invoke Romans 13. We've been actually talking about that in a few other contexts throughout this program. And so this is kind of coming full circle of why the full counsel of God is appropriate for Christians when we think through these issues. It's not just a matter of policy in a vacuum. It's ensuring that we follow what a moral and upright society is required under legitimacy and under the biblical worldview. And so, while Trump may not be thinking about it as quite as precisely in those terms, one of the things that I know why Christians by and large have supported his policies over leftist policies like the Bidens and the Kamala Harrises and on the rest of the Democrats is because fairness and being nation first and having a nation of boundaries and sovereignty and all of these things is a biblical concept. And we know that. And when President Trump and his administration act according to that, we want to support that. And so I know that you've also been speaking out as well on the Make America Healthy Again movement, which I fully support. And I think that's a much better idea for the interests of Americans rather than all of these things with how bad our food supply is, and then we have to turn to big pharmaceuticals and all of these different special interests. So what should happen in that whole vein as well?
Well, first thing I would love to see is I would like to see fewer pharmaceutical ads on my TV every evening, but I think that'd be one start. But I think it goes back and from what I can do, and I think this is the question that we as Americans should ask. What tools has God given me to do something about the problems that we have? And, coming from agriculture, I think my goal has been to focus on ag policy and how we raise our food. And the American farmer is the most productive, most efficient farmer in the world. I was over in Romania several years ago, and they've got some beautiful farmland over there, but their crops look nothing like the American crops do. And so I think that we've now focused so much on growing quantity for not only the United States but the world. Now we need to focus on quality and what we're actually growing. And I love the farm to table concept. That's something that we actually have done in Indiana, raising our own beef and other products to go straight to the restaurant and supporting our local restaurants. I'd love to see more of that happen. I think that that conversation has to happen. We're so used to kind of the 60s, 70s agricultural model to be able to produce enough food. Well, we've done that and accomplished that. Now we need to think about it. Okay, let's produce better quality food and healthier foods in the next conversation. So I'm excited about those pieces, and I think that Gen Zers and millennials, they love to have that conversation too, because we're seeing our kids having more health issues today than what our generation did and Gen X and the baby boomer generation saw.